Well, welcome everyone to your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. I'm Beth McCord.
Yeah, I'm Jeff.
And we are so excited to have you guys here today. I cannot wait for you to hear who our special guest is. But we're going to continue the conversation today about our new book, More Than Your Number, which releases September 20th. And it talks all about our new proprietary Enneagram content, which is Enneagram Internal Profile, or EIP for short. But we know that you are waiting to hear the special guest is, and I can't wait to tell you. First, it is my fellow Type 9, and second, it is Ryan O'Neill, also known as Sleeping at Last. So, Jeff, can you just give us a brief update, or not update, but a brief overview of EIP so we can jump into this conversation?
Yeah, sure. Well, if you're hearing this term EIP for the first time, I have no clue what we're talking about. That's perfectly fine. You can check out episode 112, where we go through an overview of what the Enneagram Internal Profile is. But in addition to that, if you want to know more about the Type 9 EIP, then you can go back to episode 115. That's 115, where you can learn more. And that's both in audio as well as on YouTube. Well, what is EIP? Well, have you ever thought to yourself that you resonate with various parts of the Enneagram, with various numbers? Or maybe even made a comment to yourself like, well, part of me wants to do this or part of me wants to do that. Or maybe you've even thought like, well, I know that there's a stress path, but sometimes when I go down that path, I feel more healthy. So how do I even make sense of something like that? Well, EIP helps to clarify some of these things, that we have 6 basic parts to our EIP. And that is, the first 2 are the misaligned wounded child, that is misaligned with the truth of the gospel, and our beloved child. And the 4 connecting types, the 2 wings and the 2 paths, when they're functioning on behalf of the wounded, they're going to show up in misaligned ways or unhealthy ways. But whenever they're on behalf of the beloved child, we're actually going to find our sense of giftedness and calling, and where we're showing up in life in a much more healthier way. And so what EIP is helping us to do is to identify the various parts of our hearts so that we can move beyond just descriptions of our behaviors, but actually move towards self-leadership, and to invite the Holy Spirit into this work that we're doing in order to align our hearts with what we know to be true about what Jesus has taught us. Beth, before we begin, why don't you do this? Why don't you give us an overview of the Type 9? Because you're familiar with 9s.
I hope so.
You've lived with a 9 for your entire life.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like, well, maybe I am familiar, but maybe I'm not, because we really don't know ourselves very well. So we'll see. Maybe you'll have to jump in and add some of your 2 cents.
Yeah, you're not telling the whole truth, Beth.
Right. Okay, so us Type 9s, we're easygoing, pleasant, calm, and always willing to accommodate without strong preferences of our own. But this hides the fact that we really want independence and autonomy. Basically, behind the scenes, I'll let you know, we really just don't want to be bothered. We just want inner peace. And so when life and people interrupt that inner peace, we usually try to figure out, okay, well, how can I accommodate so I can get back to that peaceful state as quickly as possible? And we don't often express our own desires and feelings because we kind of grew up really trying to avoid conflicts and discord and just staying connected with people. So we went along to get along. So we really didn't take the time to get to know ourselves. Now, the core motivations of the Type 9 are that the core fear is being in conflict, tension of any kind of discord, feeling shut out, overlooked, or losing any kind of connection with others. Now, our core desire is to have inner stability and peace of mind. But we struggle with the core weakness of sloth. Now, sloth here really is not about laziness, though we do love our cozy comforts. It's about remaining in an unrealistic and an idealistic world to keep the peace.
When you talked about cozy comforts, I literally had the thought last night, because you were refusing to go to bed, and you were on the couch, and you were so bundled up, cozied up. I'm like, she's about to go to sleep for the rest of the night.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to lose connection with you. I wanted to keep watching shows, but I was so tired.
Oh, that is so funny.
So I eventually decided.
I am part of your cozy comfort?
Sure. Oh. Well, most of the time. I'm sure there's time that's not. So anyway, we like to not be disturbed by our anger. So we fall asleep to our passions, abilities, needs, and worth by merging with others. But we have a core longing, and this is the message our heart longs to hear, and that's your presence matters. So, type nines, we do have a few weaknesses. We can be very sensitive to criticism and can take it very personally. We feel confused and unclear about our own desires and purpose and calling. I basically talk about it being that we have this internal fog, that we can't really see what we want. We can see very clearly what others want or need and willing to accommodate. But that means that we just really lack the own personal discipline to get to know ourselves. Now, one other thing is we can be kind of stubborn. I don't know if you know this, Jeff.
I've never known you to be stubborn.
But on the high side, the best qualities that we can offer is that we really do take time to learn about ourselves and honor ourselves and speaking up for ourselves and what we want in an assertive way. And this allows us to extend our true abilities and passions where we can still accommodate, but we're also still living out who we were intended to be. And so instead of people pleasing, we align with what God has called us to do. And this truly blesses the world from a remarkable place.
Well, our special guest for today, as we mentioned earlier, is Ryan O'Neill, aka Sleeping at Last. He is the Chicago-based singer, songwriter, producer, and composer. He is one of our favorite artists, and seriously listen to his music. For Beth, I think she listens most days.
Yes.
Please understand, as all of your Enneagram coach has continued to scale and new things created,
when I'm in my
Ryan
creation
has been
mode,
in her ear.
Yes, when I'm in creating mode, I'm always listening to Sleeping at
And
Last.
you may think to yourself, like, well, I've never heard his music before, but maybe you've been
you
a
have.
listener of the podcast. Well, guess what? The intro music is one of Ryan's songs.
Yep.
Well, he also did a masterful job
Yes.
of creating a song for each Enneagram type. In fact, we have all 9 songs artwork in our great room in our home, and our son has the same. Now, you'd expect that. That's Enneagram legacy. That's kids don't have a choice. They just have to have Enneagram art, I guess.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and say hello to him because it's behind him as well.
That's right. It's behind Ryan as well. Ryan, thank you so much for your time and joining us on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, it is so my pleasure. I'm excited to talk with you guys.
Well, yeah. So behind you, that if
Yep.
no one is, if you're not on YouTube, you got to go to YouTube and watch. But yeah, so you have the 9 Enneagram artwork that goes with each of the songs that
Yes.
you wrote.
Yeah,
And
painted by Alicia Edagento. And yeah,
Yes.
these are the originals back there that you can only see at an angle. But
like
those are the
originals,
real
originals.
ones, the original
Oh,
originals, like where I'm
man.
scared to touch them. But they're in there in their museum quality frames.
Sure.
Oh, that's amazing.
Ryan, I was just doing some coaching today, and the music, the songs, it just seems like there are songs that are just popular to everyone and they enjoy them,
Sure.
but it's almost like you wrote specific letters to these people of each of the Enneagram types. What was it for you that was just so remarkable, miraculous about writing those songs?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for saying that. That means a lot. When I decided, I first became familiar with the idea of the Enneagram through my friend Chris Hewart. And this was probably about 4 or 5 years before I decided to write these songs. And it was watching him talk and teach about the Enneagram that all the pieces just kind of clicked in my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to write a song from the perspective of each of these types. So I just kind of earmarked it as an idea. And then eventually, once it made sense to do that in my Atlas project, which is this kind of long form series of songs, I started in on the first song, One. And I think it was like maybe a week or two into that I realized like, oh, this is not just writing songs. This is really presumptuous of me to decide that I'm going to write from the perspective of 9 very uniquely different types than my own as a type 9. So that put a huge amount of pressure, but also an amount of respect or reverence towards each of the types. And so that just led to like really deep research right away. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just writing a descriptive song about each of the types. I wanted to write and understand how it might feel just a little bit to actually struggle with the wounds of that type, or to kind of revel in the beauty of that type. And it took a lot longer to write those songs than I had anticipated. Most other themes that I get excited to explore, they're a little bit more abstract, or like, I wrote a song for each of the planets in our solar system. Saturn does not care if I screw that
Right.
up.
That's true. That's true.
It's not a big deal. But once I realized that people were kind of, any listeners that gave me feedback, like when I announced that I was going to write these Enneagram songs, I kept hearing the same theme, which was, I can't wait to hear my song. And something about that language was just like, oh my gosh, like,
That's right.
this is no longer just me writing songs for fun. I need to honor each type the best that I possibly can. And so for each of the types, one of the things that I think stuck out the most to me was, I didn't feel ready to write the song until my heart kind of broke for the type. And there was something that I learned, like for the type 1, just kind of recognizing that the self-critic, and completely recognizing myself in the self-critic of the type 1. Something about like the idea of like the self-criticism that they feel, or that you're in tune with, is only, the tip of an iceberg for what they're feeling inside. Like that, something about that just like tore me up. And I was like, now I know how to write that song. Now I understand what the angle is, or what the point of it should be, because they should be redemption stories. That's what I really wanted to write. I didn't want to write, as I said, descriptions in the form of a song. So, but I did feel with every song that I identified as that type. Like by the end of it, I'm like, maybe I am a 1.
Right.
Maybe I am a type 2. Maybe I am a type 2.
I did that for years. That's such a type 9 thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's such a kind of a cliche
Well, Ryan,
9. Like
hearing about your process, I think, is even more so that whenever we consider the idea of looking into our spouse's types, or our kids' types, or our friends, to realize that you can't just go to a website and read a page and all of a sudden you get this type.
Totally.
And which speaks to why we've entitled the book, which was a kind of a catchphrase in the Enneagram world, is that I'm more than a stinking number. We didn't name the book that way. It's
Not
a little
stinking.
more polished. That's right. But we're so much more. There's so much more complexity than just simply a description on a page. And to spend time with, and to begin to experience part of the brokenness. That's not only a part of what it means to find your type, but it also means to get to know our types. And
exactly right.
Ron, one of the things that, as I think about this too, when we hear the songs, we think it's almost like we're hearing the song that our Father sings over us. Like I see you, I know you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not disappointed in you. I am present. And so incredibly grateful.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Ryan,
Truly.
why don't we jump into 9ness?
Well, hold on.
You got something?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I want to ask maybe 3 specific questions regarding to writing your songs, or highlight 3 things. One, when I first started listening, I think it was type 1 song that came out that I can't remember if I had heard his music before or recognized it was the same artist. Anyway, all that to be said.
At a church, a pre-service.
That's right. So, but no matter what, I didn't know your Enneagram type. But when I heard that song, and I think especially maybe when I heard 2, I was like, if this guy's not a 9, I will be shocked. Because,
awesome.
And this is...
It's because you're Yoda, and you can just feel
you're the best type. No. But
you can feel it in the air,
Yeah, but in all that, I just want people to understand, especially 9s that are out there, what beautiful gifts 9s can bring to this world if you're willing to step into the uncomfortableness of showing up. And
absolutely,
what you did was because 9s can see all 9 perspectives except for their own, which we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And we can embody that type. We have empathy and sympathy and compassion, and we literally we step in their shoes. And that's why when I was listening to your songs, because the nuance of it, even listening to your podcast. So if you guys are interested, listen to his podcast on each of the songs. He breaks it down into why he chose what he chose. But what I love is that you only had artist play alongside you if they were that type.
Yes.
And you would have then also little sounds or music stamps or sound stamps that were from those types embedded in. And so what I love is that you honored the type in so many various ways, and you showed up to create the song and, produce and execute the song, even though you were a 9, I know that when you were doing it, you were embodying that type. And so with
Thank you.
that, I would love for 2 things. I'd love for you, there's something I want to ask you about the Type 8 song in regards to that. And then I want to ask you about the struggle it was to write your own song. And then we'll dive into
Sounds
Type
good.
9. So the
That
first
sounds
thing I want
great.
to talk about is the Type 8. So, oh my gosh. So 8 is a very strong part of who I am.
Yeah.
And it goes back
Powerhouse.
to when I was a little girl. My brother teased me a lot, and there were these moments like my 8 part was like, I'm done, but I was
Sure.
4 years younger. So she like tried to be as strong and, protective or whatever. And, I mean, you're 4 years younger. It's not really doing anything. But that part of me was there to really speak up for myself, to protect myself. And so there's this part, I love her, but she also can get me in trouble at times.
Right. Right.
So when that song came out, I'm so glad I listened to it by myself because I literally wept, like just
Oh,
wept because it touched a part of me that I resonate so strongly with. Even though it's not my main type, it's such a strong part. But what I want you to share is, as I was just saying a second ago, how you as a 9 can embody that type. Tell us what happened in the song because you literally took on the persona of an 8 so much that what happened at at the climax of the song.
yeah. That was I really enjoy it. It kicked my butt, to be totally honest. Writing that song was there was like 2 or 3 in the Enneagram songs that really took it out of me. And Type 8 and my own Type 9 takes the cake actually. But Type 8, I felt like it's the easiest type to, I don't know, it takes the most beating out of every type, because they are
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
big and powerful. They feel like, I feel like anytime you learn about a Type 8 or the Enneagram in general, you can like, they seem so tough that it seems easy to like push them around. And so I really wanted to play around with that. Some of my closest friends are Type 8s. And
Yeah.
so I really wanted to make sure that I could like try to embody that strength and that power. I, as far as a wing goes, I don't know that I have much of an 8 wing,
Mhm.
other than just a deep connection with the people that identify as a Type 8. But I really wanted to like just pour everything I could, like do that, do that same thing that the Type 8 does, and just pour it all out in the
Yeah.
song. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I was
You're right.
recording the vocals for that song, I really wanted to like, I wasn't trying to protect my voice. I just really like wanted to, and I wrote it in a higher key so that it would force me to,
Mm-hmm.
project as much as I possibly could. And there was several takes that I very nearly passed out because I was singing so hard and so loud.
Wow.
Um, and I just wanted to kind of have that energy that every Type 8 that I know has, which is always so interesting to me, that the Type 8 is, you know, on a public level or socially, they have this huge personality, but really they're just like the softest, sweetest,
They are.
people
Yeah.
underneath. And so I wanted to have kind of both things. So like the instrumentation
Mm-hmm.
is strings and kind of it's got some beauty to it, and then also like the song starts kind of abruptly, like there's just like a big kind of smash, like the music just kind of crashes in. And the same thing with the ending. Like I wanted it to be like, if you were looking at it as a wave file, it just was a
Mm-hmm.
box. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Um, it starts and it stops.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved writing that song. It was very, very fun because, again, I feel like it's so easy to either poke fun at, or just kind of like, you just assume a
Mm-hmm.
Type 8 can take it, but they're super
Yeah.
sensitive like everyone.
Yeah. When I love that you gave all the passion and the physical attributes you have in the song to the point of passing out. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what an 8 would do. An 8 gives all that they have until their body
Yeah.
literally stops.
And
And
I'm kind of jealous when that happens. Like I see my Type 8 friends like just going for it, and
mm,
everything that they do, and I'm like, man, it would be nice to not be so conservative with my energy, because I am always like,
right.
Or we
Yeah.
could just, hang out at home.
We could just chill. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, so what I would love is that as we go through you as a type 9,
Mhm.
we'll use, like you writing the song as a type 9,
Yeah.
painting that picture, but also just the journey of being an artist and like getting yourself out there. Because as we all know, as 9s, it's like we have this record player message in our mind: don't assert yourself, don't
Yeah,
promote
for
yourself,
sure.
don't look arrogant.
For
And
sure.
yet, really the things that we can offer the world the most and the best things we can offer is when we show up.
Yeah.
But how hard that is. So let's take a look at the wounded child a little bit, and then we'll just take a look at the wounded child and the beloved child. We're going to kind of
Yeah.
truncate this a little bit differently than, and so we're just going to
Mm-hmm.
like wipe that all out. We're going to kind of truncate this because I want to make sure we capture all
Mhm.
this, but I want to give you as much time to just tell us
Sure.
about your process of learning, because I know you've been on this long journey, and like
For
you said,
sure.
type 9, kicked your rear end in the process of
Yeah.
learning, which
It
that's how
really
it is
did.
for all of us type 9s.
Yeah.
So the wounded child part of the type 9 is the part of us that is wounded and afraid, and we really think our presence doesn't matter or our voice
Yeah.
doesn't matter. We think no one really wants us to show up. We can't say, hey, look at me, or look at this, or look what I did. And so we hide and we get
Sure.
quiet. And if we feel any kind of tension in life, we try to quickly assess what that tension is. We can feel it in our gut, and we get scared, and we just want to accommodate the best. Like, what do you need? What do I, how can I make you happy? And that's the biggest thing, is how can I make people happy? But in that
Sure.
process, we lose ourselves. So even as children, we were trying to be connected to our parents, and that may have happened, it may not have happened, but we were trying. And so we would look at them and we would take in their thoughts, their wants, their desires, but then it would kind of flush us out. And they probably didn't even know this. And so it's like, yeah, I'll totally do that with you, mom or dad. And it's like, do I really want to do it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let's connect.
Right.
But then when we get older, it becomes, I don't know myself. Because I remember when someone
Right.
asked me, hey, if you, could do whatever you want for $1 million, what would you want? And I'm like, I don't know. I know what I could buy Jeff or my kids. And it kind of
Sure.
freaked me out. Like, I don't know. Um, and so that process of waking up to ourselves is really hard. It's like this internal fog that it's a very slow process. But if we are willing to go that process, we will eventually see ourselves little bit by little bit. Now, the beloved part of our heart is the part that knows how God created us, and that we not only have the ability to see all 9 types and to accommodate and to love and to honor all the 9 types, to have them have a voice, but
Yeah.
we allow ourselves to have a voice. We show up. We offer the world the best of who we are by not accommodating, but by mediating, by bringing people together. And it honors everyone, and they feel seen and heard and loved, which is really what people are looking for. So, Ryan, I'd love to hear, how has the wounded child part of your heart shown up in your life? And then what's been the process as using the Enneagram and maybe your own faith in seeing and learning about the beloved child and how that's all played into your music?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was funny writing all 8 songs before the Type 9. People kept making jokes to me that it's going to be so hard to write the Type 9 song. And I was so confused by that, because to me it sounded like, I'm like, all my songs are Type 9 songs. I've been writing since I was 10,
Which is why I
Um,
listen to them all day.
yeah, thank you, thank you. So I really genuinely was surprised when I started writing the Type 9 song, and just realizing that, like, yeah, like I can probably write that descriptive version of a Type 9 song, and it felt very
Mm,
much like a specimen. Like I see other 9s, and I'm not bringing
mhm,
much of myself to it, but I can write that song. And so I did. I actually wrote quite a bit of it, and then
mm.
kind of my radar, wouldn't let me, put that out there. So I just kept realizing, like, all right, in the same way that my heart has to break for all these other types, I need to, like, first probably figure out who I am, because it was like you said, it was this very scary kind of process for me,
Yeah.
to realize, like, this has actually been a recurring theme in my life, especially in the last couple of years, is, what do you want? And I have no answer. Like, I don't know. I genuinely
Yeah.
don't know. It's the most unsatisfying thing for anybody else to hear, but it's even more unsatisfying to truly not know what you want, whether it's like a direction with my career, or the next, season of life with my family. And it's just a weird thing to kind of recognize that those parts have been turned down. And that was the big kind of moment in writing this song for me. And just personally, unrelated to the song, was just realizing that like I have turned the volume down of most of who I am since I was a kid. And I can kind of pinpoint that it wasn't based on any. I had a beautiful childhood. My parents were amazing, especially my mom. And I feel like I had all of the love accessible in the world, and I truly felt unconditionally loved. But somehow when I was about 14 years old, there was this shift, whether I think it was subconscious, but it was this shift that basically meant that I'm going to take like a backseat position. I didn't want to figure out what I want. I wanted to just facilitate everyone else's desires and what everyone else wanted. And it wasn't even this, even as I'm saying it, I'm like, that sounds so selfless. And it's not. It was just easier. It's easier to do that than it is to own who you are and to show up and still mediate and still create peace. What you want is such a conflict when it comes to peace, with other people, because what you want might not be what other people want. And that creates this tension. So when I was writing the song, like I said, there was this first version that just did not touch on any part of who I am. It was more of like a clinical study of the type 9 specimen. And I threw that away. And because I realized that like, no, this needs to be the most, even if it's really sad, which it kind of was, it all really did break my heart to realize that like I've turned the volume down on who I am. And that even with making music, it's this interesting thing. As you said, it's hard for type 9s to put ourselves forward. But for some reason, I found a path in putting myself forward in music for all of my teenage and now adult years so far, which is so contrary to who I am in other areas of life. So I'm very confident in my music most of the time. I'm usually, it depends on the moment that you ask me, but I put it out there. I continually put it out there, and I've done that since I was a kid. And what I realized in writing this song was like, oh, I'm actually not very in touch with my heart. Even though I'm writing these extremely heart-forward songs, these songs that mean the absolute world to me, they are my deepest secrets in my journal and everything else. But for some reason, by doing that in the craft of songwriting, I've actually forgotten that I need to do that in my life, that I need to so I've considered myself up until writing the type 9 song as a very heart forward person. And I think learning more about the type 9 and realizing, no, I've actually my identity isn't sleeping at last. It has been too intertwined. And once I realized that, it made me sad in realizing how reserved I've been with my emotions and my heart in my life to my wife and to my kids and to my family. And so it was a very sobering moment for me to realize that I've not been leading with this quality that I have, that all 9s have, and it is heart, and I really, really, really wanted to change that. So writing the type 9 was me reconciling that problem, and then also trying to figure out a way forward to forgive myself and to wake up. And so that, but it was the hardest song I've ever written by a country mile. And it also, in retrospect, is probably the most personal song I've ever written. And it is, which is so cliche because obviously it's my type, it's a type 9, but it was a much deeper dive into myself and my wounds than I was expecting. And so I guess to your question, that made me very familiar with my wounds. And before writing that song, I'd latch onto a couple ideas of those, and I'd be working on things personally, but learning and researching type 9 kind of for the sake of other people, because I'm like, well, I'm not the only type 9 in the world. I have to write it. I have to write something for the type 9, because if it was up to me, I just would skip that song. I just move on. Eight Enneagram. I just changed it.
Let's focus on everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I kind of felt. And but so that made me very familiar with those wounds, and kind of it made me face them in some
Yeah.
way. So I'm still doing that. I'm still doing the work. I'm trying to do the work
Yeah.
at facing
And
those wounds. And yeah.
I think that's important to actually highlight. And I wish we could like see comments on the screen or something of other nines, because I think what you just said had this like aha moment for myself is type nines, we feel connected to both our parents or caregivers, whether we were or not, we tried to, I should say.
Sure.
But I would say majority of nines feel a connection to their caregivers, whether they should have or should not have. And
Yeah.
usually the nines will paint an unrealistic and idealistic version of their childhood more than what was really there, because it's way too scary to think of anything else. Like we just want to, like, everyone's great, everything was fine, because like I was fine, I just, I had a normal childhood, which some people had great, but all of us have had pain and sorrows, but it's just too painful for the nine to wake up to the reality and to dive into their own story where there was pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And so we try to skip over that and kind of numb ourselves out, but we can't truly show up in the world unless we start to do that work. But it's so scary. And so to have other people in our life that will listen, and that's what's hard, because most people get in the trap with the nine, because when the nine's talking, usually people can overpower the nine or start talking over the nine, or they look kind of bored and the nine's thinking, oh, they don't want to listen to me. I'll just shift the conversation back onto them. And then the other person talks for the rest of the hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And so the beauty is if you can find someone that really wants to listen to the nine and the nine story and allow them to really unfold their story, because the nine has a hard time seeing it for themselves. But for someone to empathetically listen is so powerful. And I think for the nines out there, I know it's scary to dive into your story, but the beauty that's going to come out of it is you being able to fully be present for others in ways that you never thought possible. And I really feel like that's what your songs did for everyone, is that you were able to go there for them. But even for us nines, so I know I wept with 8, but I wept just as hard with 9. And I was at a mastermind conference, actually speaking on the Enneagram to Stu McLaren's mastermind group. And I luckily was sitting down, and my daughter, I think it was Libby, it might have been Nate, they sent me the image that like you had posted on Instagram, because you posted the animal image that she had painted for the type 9 before the song came out.
Yeah.
They sent it to me. I literally was crying in the middle of all of these people. Of course, I was trying to like hide it, because the elephants have represented so much of how I see myself. We are so, on one side, gentle and kind and communal, but we're so strong and we have such a big presence, yet we diminish it as if it's really nothing. But when we're passionate about something, you better watch out. Here we come. Yeah. And that's how I feel about the work that you offer, is so you write from a place of knowing, and you deliver from that place. So I just want to say thank you so much for honoring each of the types, and more importantly, really honoring the 9, because I know that I can just imagine how hard that must have been to put yourself out there in such a vulnerable way.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. That means the world to me.
So now everyone's got to listen to all the songs. So let's dive into, so with EIP, you have 6 parts. We just talked about the first 2, the wounded and the beloved, which is connected to the 9. And then we have the 2 wings and the 2 Enneagram paths, which is the ones that are connected with the lines. So let's dive into the wings real quick. And I know I'm kind of, sorry, Jeff, I'm just
letting the 9s take over the podcast.
I know. Get out of here.
Man,
we got this.
It's about time you 6s kept your mouth shut.
But anyway, because I know, Ryan, you only have so much time, so I want to honor your time. And because I'm a 9, I can just kind of breeze through this pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I want to paint a picture.
I'm going to be here to support you.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. I mean, I want you to chime in, because what I want to do, Ryan, and I haven't done this for the other types until the end of our conversation, but I want to paint the picture of the 9 from how I view myself and how I experience. And I would love to hear, and you this is the first time you've heard this, so trust me if it's like, hey, I get it. If you're like, I don't know, I haven't thought of it that way. But I'd love to hear if you can resonate with how I experience my type 9 from this EIP perspective.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
as we talked about the wounded child, and I call her little Bethy because that's the little girl in me. And she's just trying to keep the peace, everyone. And then Coach Beth is the one that shows up for the podcast and my courses and all that stuff. And so, but then, so if we follow the wounded child, little Bethy, if she's kind of feeling like, especially like, let's say with Jeff and I, and this you can kind of imagine for you and your wife, like if I can't tell how he's doing, like, are you okay? Is there some tension
Sure,
or is he
yeah.
getting kind of intense? Then my little Bethy is like, uh-oh. And so my 6 part, I call her when she's not aligned, I call her worrying Wendy. And
Yeah, yeah.
she's acting as the 6, but on the behalf of the 9. So she's like,
Yep.
okay, what's happening? She's getting worried. She's thinking of all the possible scenarios. Okay, well, is he upset about this? Or what about that? Well, could have been this. Well, what if we do it this way? Or what if we have a conversation like that? Or what if we should just wait? Well, no, he wants us to be assertive, but I don't really feel like being assertive, So she gets all jumbled up with all the possibilities of relationship connection. But then my 3 part, which I call her not so good enough Natalie, she's like, you're not doing this very good. Like you're kind of not a great wife. Like you're just not showing up. He's going to be super disappointed in you. You're failing at this. You're pretty much worthless. That's what she's saying. Then my type 1 shows up, and I call her, when she's not aligned, Vicious Victoria. And she brings a baseball bat, and the inner critic, she just comes at me like, you are a bad wife. Like, and she just lays out all of these things, and it's just so painful. But then my type 8 part comes, and I call her Raging Regina. And she's had it with all of these other parts. Like, she's like, ready to plow over all of them and just say, forget you all. You're not helpful to little Bethy, but I will be. So then she comes and she's a little bit more assertive in her relationship status with Jeff and kind of wants to plow over him, though he and my kids say, Mom, because I think of it as like becoming the Hulk. And they're like, your Hulk is like a foot tall. Like, it's really not the Hulk. And I'm like,
More of an angry no.
Right.
But it feels huge to me, I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah,
really angry. And so I feel like, oh no, here comes Regina because she's going to like hurt relationships and like cause more conflict, but she's trying to help. And so that's kind of how it plays out with the wounded
The
child.
wounded, yeah.
And
Well, why don't we pause there before you go into
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So I'll show what it looks like when the beloved's online, but does that
Sure.
resonate with you? And if so,
Oh, yeah.
how do you see it?
Absolutely, 100%. And I've gone through different seasons of my life where definitely, right now, I would say, just to be vulnerable, so I lost my mom in March, and she and I were extremely, extremely close. And I can tell that 6 part, that path is lit up in a way that has never been lit up in my life before, where like my grieving process has kind of turned that part of me on. And I'm a worrier in general, but this is like it's a lot of anxiety is created, and there's so many what ifs in my world in the last 4 months, and I've been kind of observing that because I think, like you said, that part of me is trying to help. It's trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense to me. If my goal is my desire is peace, it's not here right now, and therefore that part of that 6 part of me is examining everything, like saying nothing feels safe. And so I have that very, very loud in my ear. And the type 1 part that is ultra critical in the wounding, that's been a path or a passenger for a very long time for me. And that was part of writing the type 1 song, was realizing like, oh shoot, previous to writing the song, I would have thought I have nothing in common with the type 1, but that self-critic is hardcore a part of my world, and is constantly holding me to a standard that's impossible. And the type 3 aspect of it, in the wounded version, is definitely like, I think I said something earlier today to my wife. I'm like, yeah, I just don't know. Like, the amount of songs I've put out this year is just kind of embarrassing, and I get it. I've gone through some hard stuff, but like, what am I doing? Like it's constant, like a keeping score over
Yeah.
there a little bit,
Yeah, and that's why I call her not good enough. It's like she's constantly
Yeah,
like, it's not really good enough, is it?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
I've worked
And it's
so
not even
hard.
like it is critical, but it doesn't feel like, it's not the one
Right.
energy where it's like you suck. Not that
Yeah.
type ones would say that, but my self critic is constantly saying that. And
Yeah.
the three aspect of me is just constantly reminding me that there's a status quo that I'm not hitting, and that is
Hmm.
hard. And then the eight part of me, that is definitely, that point is, it's flaring up in really random, like you said, like the 1 foot tall Hulk. Like when I get mad, it's so awkward. Like I'm not good
Yes.
at it. So it's like
That's what my
it's
family
like
says.
it's like almost funny. Like
Right.
I've yelled at a couple people recently that, definitely needed to be yelled at. And I'm pretty sure, like, in retrospect, I don't think I was really yelling. I think I just said that I'm a little frustrated with this. But in my head, I'm like, oh man, I knocked that person out. Like I should probably apologize. That was pretty intense. And
Right.
realizing that, like, no, I'm like, you know what? I really didn't appreciate that. That was
Right.
the extent of it. So yeah, so that A part is, I've noticed in my grief in the past 4 or 5 months,
Mhm.
that like it's not even, I mean, it's a little disconnected from anger, but I believe it is from like the eight part of me
Yeah.
that is just like, it's it is unacceptable that certain things are unfair. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there's like a principle. I'm getting more
Yep.
frustrated about principles than I am about actual things happening. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm getting over this
I can
cough. I'm sorry.
remember in some training that I took when we did Strength Finders, and one of the things that it was under Dan Allender, and Allender was talking about how these strengths were like the mechanisms that we use to cope with the tragedy, with the trauma. So it would make sense then that experiencing loss, that all the parts of you that are there intended to care for you would now come online to try to resolve this tragedy in your life, to bring comfort, to bring peace, all out of the core motivations of the nine of, well, how to someone I was attached to
Mhm.
and having lost, what does that mean for me now? Would be
I've even
incredibly
said
sorrowful.
thank you. Yeah, I was telling, I think, my therapist that it's so dramatic to say, and I'm 39 years old, so my childhood is long gone. But with my mom's passing, it really
Mhm.
is the passing of my childhood, because she's my connection to every part of that. I have
Right.
my brother, I have my dad, but like even facts about who I am, just I don't have an amazing memory in general. Like I
Mm.
like stuff that happened last year. I'm still kind of like, what was that again?
Me too.
But my mom was like
Hmm.
this go to, like, hey, my daughter was asking about, you know, the toys that I played with when I was 6. Like what I don't remember. I have no idea. Or like what was I into? She knew. And so now with her passing,
Mhm.
it sort of was like, oh, that's gone now. And there is this, like you said, all these parts are now online that are trying to reconcile that
Yeah.
loss of my childhood. But as a
Well, and
39-year-old,
oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
no, no,
Well, and I think that's a great segue because I think what's so important that we pointed out in the book and that we really recognize is that a lot of times we want to shame or condemn or push aside or ignore whatever you want to do to these wounded parts of ourselves because they
Well, it's
usually
interesting. I mean, even in the initial names they gave these parts,
right the
they were
initial names
primarily negative
negative
names.
right because that's how I saw them so much clearer than the positive attributes.
Yes.
And so I first gave them these negative names because I kind of felt like you're getting in the way of me connecting with people in peace, like because my family would kind of point out these things in me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my sixth part. Oh, get away, Wendy, like. But these parts are just trying their best to help. They're these little children within us that are ill equipped. We talk about all the time driving a bus. And the beloved child should be driving the bus. They're the adult, mature, grounded person. But when it's in the back seat sleeping, the rest of these children are freaking out, trying their best to like steer this thing. They don't even know what they're doing. And so they
yeah,
usually
yeah, yeah,
crash. And then we get upset with them. It's like, And they're like, I'm just trying to help. Like, no one else was
Doing what they
here.
can.
So we want to honor these parts by seeing what they've tried to, how they've tried to help us, and but also come alongside and shepherd and mentor, teach, coach, whatever, analogy you want to use,
Yeah, sure.
to move from that wounded place to the beloved place. Because knowing who we are in God's eyes and how he loves and cares for us and the freedom we have allows us to relax and to know that we have actually what we long for. So for the 9, we long to hear your presence matters. And we know that that's true with God because of all that he has done in and through his son. Like, we are safe and secure. We are reconciled with him. We have peace and harmony. Yes, we won't have it completely here on earth, but we will one day have it fully. And so when we get to that place and we're like, oh, and he did all this because I matter to him, then we can kind of stand up strong and assertive and like really give of ourselves and how he created us. So I'd love to paint a picture of how my parts show up in a beloved sense and see how that's happened for you. So
Sure.
for me as a type 9, again, the wounded child is usually saying, don't assert yourself. Like, don't get out there. And I hid with the Enneagram for probably 14 years-ish.
Yeah, that's right.
And just keeping quiet. And actually, there was times I had Jeff do presentations, and I'm like Wizard of Oz, the wizard in the background, like pulling the strings, like say this and
Right.
say that.
I don't know about that.
Well, I did all the
Yeah,
presentation.
but we certainly
Like,
created content together.
okay.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so but so then I just really felt like, and there's a story that goes with this, but I had this awakening moment. Like, I train people to overlook me. What I permit, I promote. And am I going to continue to do that? And that was like this aha moment. And that's when I decided I'm going to start your Enneagram coach and we're just going to do this thing. And there's a lot of background story to that. So when that part of me woke up, what I saw was that, as you know, with your songwriting, there's so many hurdles to overcome. And the 9's like, I'm out. Like, this is too
Right.
hard. This isn't comfortable. But my 6 part, who was worrying Wendy, becomes either wonderful or warrior Wendy. And she's like, we can do hard things. We can have courage and be
Yeah.
brave. Because the 6s are facing their fears and their anxieties all the time. And they're the most courageous on the Enneagram. So she gives me courage. My 3 is like, hey, let's get these things done. We can do this. And let's set out a plan, a mission, goals, and accomplish things. And then my 1 is like, hey, let's stay grounded and principled.
When you described a 3, I'm like, oh, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That part of you that's like, I've got to get this done right now.
Right now.
Right now. I'm like, no, you don't. There's no pressure here, but okay,
Natalie's
now I
like,
know.
yes.
Yes.
And then, so I call her Noble Natalie. And then Virtuous Victoria comes online and she's like, here's the right way to do things. I'm going to help and guide you and keep you grounded and principled. And then my 8 is like, I've got the strength and the power to plow a path for you, Beth. Like, you can do this. And they get all behind me, Coach Beth, and they help me to accomplish things that honestly, just me as a type 9 wouldn't want to ever try
Right.
to accomplish. But with all of them there, they offer me so much more than just being a type 9, which is why we call it more than your
Yeah.
number. So how does all
Well,
of
you
these,
didn't mention the other name for Regina.
Remarkable Regina. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
yeah. So how do these parts show up in a healthy way to accomplish the things that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I feel like I have the beloved parts of 3 are definitely like very, very focused in my career and in Sleeping at Last as a whole. I'm very driven. Like it's kind of funny. I work by myself in terms of like I write and record and do everything in this space on my own, and that's because it's exactly how I like to do it. I know exactly what I want to do. It's not always pleasant or fun or easy, but it's a very focused, like
Yeah.
it's I think that could be the part of the 1 and the part of the 3 that just has a mission, and I understand it and I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so when that comes online, it feels great. Like I've said, even when I'm in the middle of writing a song, like I'll complain a bunch, but at the same time, it always feels good. Like knowing I couldn't be doing anything more productive than I'm doing right now
Yes.
in terms of like my goals of my career. When I'm, having a hard time writing or whatever, then that's when the wounded parts of me show up. But and then I think for the six path, that beloved version of me is showing up. It's actually interesting in the last few months with the grief. So like I mentioned, the anxieties and stuff have been turned up, but the kind of the beautiful parts of that is that courage of the type 6 that has sort of shown up too. I have been horribly terrified of all things dentists and doctors for my entire adult life, to the point where I hadn't gone in an extremely long time to the dentist, like extremely long time, like more than anyone ever guesses. And part of my dealing with the anxiety that I was feeling about kind of everything was facing it. And so I ended up like chipping a part of my tooth, and I could have left it alone. It didn't hurt. It was fine. And so I ended up like, it was like my day of dental reckoning. And so I tried to figure out a way to, like, I found a dentist in town, and I got through all of the work that was necessary, that was needed for, I'll just tell you, it was 25 years. It was a very long time of not going. And so I it's such a small, like, normal adult thing to do.
Yeah.
But for me, it felt like this massive mountain, and it was courageous for me, and it was an act of courage. I also found a primary care physician, and I went to my first appointment, and like I have a therapist over this last year now, and so there's all these different little mountains that are just tiny little hills for anyone else, but for me, that's the beloved part of 6 that is showing up and saying you can do hard things, as you said, and so those are the ways that those parts, and I feel like the more principled type 8 has yet to be turned on lately. Like, I feel like it's still mostly getting frustrated with things that aren't fair.
Yes,
but it hasn't, the beloved part of that. I'm trying to think in my past.
Ryan, do you ever find that 8 part of your heart showing up when you're overlooked? Like when there's an injustice in the world, that there's passion and energy?
But instead
sort
of plowing over people, it plows a path for you to be heard.
I would say that is true. It gives me the right lane to explore that that principled, like, a reaction to feeling overlooked. So I would say that it does show up in that way. It just has less specific paths in the past 6 months, but before that, I can think of lots of stories where my beloved 8 is helping me out and protecting me.
Yeah.
And I noticed too that Beth's 8ness or 8 part shows up in parenting, plowing a path for the kids.
Yeah.
Like there's advocacy when, like, if she perceives that we're being overlooked, she steps in to fight.
Because I know I can do it with kindness and assertiveness, and I'm okay going there because it needs to be done. Now, that's not every single time. There's always some times where I'm scared, but yeah, you're right. Well, Brian, we want to honor your time, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming. And can you just share with everyone where they can find you, follow you, get your work?
That's so sweet. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was such a joy, and I'm really honored to get to speak with you guys. My music is everywhere music is. So Spotify, Apple Music is where you can find all of my music, including the Enneagram. Enneagram is part of my Atlas collection, but if you just search Enneagram, they should come up. And sleepingatlast.com is where, kind of I share news. And
don't you have either a membership or pay, like what do you have on your website?
So because Atlas, and I have a few different series. So the one thing that I work on is called astronomy, and that's where I focus on cool things that happen in space, kind of on the schedule that they happen in space. So that's my macro project, where I'm just writing soundtracks for cool space events. And then I have Atoms, which is a newer series of music that is for the micro, for the little tiny moments of beauty that I see in my life that I want to write a 1-minute piece of music for, mostly instrumental. And then, so Atlas is the container, it's the human experience of all of the macro and the micro. So that's where the Enneagram lives, that's where my planet songs live, that's where my emotions live, and all the different themes. And so because those are thematic series, I've taken different subscriptions over the years, but mostly you can still subscribe to Atlas. But mostly, I feel like people just want to hear it on Spotify and Apple Music. Like it's
Yeah.
such an on-demand world that I feel
Yeah,
like.
but I want people to go and support your work. So go
Oh,
sign
thank
up,
you.
subscribe.
That's sweet.
Well,
Thank
I
you
just want
very
to
much.
say, Brian, thank you so much for just being here. When our book comes out, well, here are our 9 books, but and you
Oh, nice.
forwarded the
Those
type
are so
9.
beautiful, by the way. I love your backdrop.
Thanks.
It's so
And
awesome. Your
then when
backdrop, as if it's like a wallpaper, but your
yeah.
your bookshelf. I love that wallpaper. Where do I get that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When you see any of my work come out, just know that your music has played a key part in helping me to stay focused and like dialed in to like the best parts of who I am. So I just want to
You.
thank you for showing up, and I just hope that all 9s out there recognize how important it is for each of us to show up, that God has given us gifts to bless others, and it's important for us to show up because, Ryan, if you didn't show up, we wouldn't have this incredible, beautiful work for us to enjoy. So again, thank you so much. And I know that you've got to
Thank you very
run,
much.
but yeah, thanks for
Seriously,
coming.
such a delight, Jeff. Thank you so much, Beth. I really appreciate you guys and the work you're doing. And yeah, it was really, really fun. Thanks for letting my music be a part of the backdrop of your work. That means the world to me.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Hey, well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and be sure to share this episode with all the type 9s that you love in your life, and well, I guess even the 9s you don't love, because they could all
Wake them up.
It's just that's so funny to say it that way, but hey, we hope this has been helpful for you. And so what you've seen today is in part what it's like to be in Enneagram coaching. And so if you would like to find a coach that's near you or maybe is skilled in areas where you need some help, you can head over to myenneagramcoach.com, where you can find one of our certified Enneagram coaches from around the globe. And be sure to pre-order our new book, More Than Your Number. It releases on Tuesday, September 20th, wherever books are sold. Matter of fact, be sure to get one for your friends and even those friends you don't like. Fantastic. Well, then make sure to join us next week. We're going to have the privilege of interviewing Adam Young, who is the licensed clinical social worker, but also is the host of the podcast, The Place We Find Ourselves. It's going to be amazing, talking about the Enneagram Internal Profile of the Type 8.
Yeah, it's going to be a special treat. But as always, guys, remember that the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It is the gospel that transforms us. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.